my name is Skyler DuPont. I use they, them pronouns. I came to unschooling from birth. I was unschooled my whole entire life up until I went to undergraduate. And I still consider myself to be an unschooler through the undergraduate and graduate school process because it was all my choice. It was all directed by me. It was what I wanted to do. But when I was very young, I have an older brother, and my mom kind of went to go check out the sort of local preschool kindergarten situation. And she just knew it would not be a good fit for him. And didn't feel like the right fit for her either to leave him somewhere all day. And that was really the beginning of our alternate education journey was my mom deciding not to put my brother into pre-K. And from there, we kind of went into the homeschooling realm. And like a lot of people who come to unschooling, we came to it through, oh, we're going to homeschool. And then kind of just realizing that the sort of conventional homeschooling approach wasn't for us, wasn't for our family, and just through time became gradually more and more unschooling. By the time I rolled around 3 years later, we were well and truly on that path, and so unschooling was really all I ever knew.
So looking back on all of that, from the far distance of adulthood now, what did you like the best about unschooling for yourself, and what did you like the least about it?
There are so many positive things about my experience as an unschooler. It's so hard to pick just one. I have a severe neurocognitive disability. I'm severely dyslexic, and it's genetically inherited. My father has the same disability. My grandfather has the same disability. In school, both of them were just labeled as the R word and not given appropriate supports. So I know that if I was in school, I would have been in special education. I probably would not have had the appropriate support for my neurocognitive disability. So one of the things that I loved about my unschooling background was that I was able to flourish in a type of education that fit with my neurotype and that worked for me. The positives that you get as far as spending time with your family, being able to really bond with your family, have those close bonds, but also getting to know yourself. I think I got to know myself at a much younger age than a lot of other folks because I had the time and space to be able to do that, to learn who I am, to learn how I learn, to learn what works best for me as far as learning, and to explore deeply the areas of interest that were mine without being held back by my reading is really a huge issue. I'm severely dyslexic. I've always struggled with reading. I was in specialized reading tutoring my whole life. And if I was in school, that really would have held me back in being able to explore areas that were of deep interest to me and have turned into lifelong passions. Truly too many positives to share about it. I had a childhood that was full of joy and celebration of who I am as an individual that was tailor-made for me. I could go to my mom and tell her anything in the world that I was interested in. A great example of this was when I was a kid. I attended the Northeast Unschooling Conference. I was probably 9 years old, maybe 10 years old, and I attended a workshop on spinning yarn, hand spinning yarn. And it just clicked with me. I just loved it. And after that, I, went home and I told my mom, I really want to explore this. And she found a friend who had a spinning wheel, brought it to our house, got me, fiber arts lessons. And I still do it to this day. I sell my yarn at craft fairs. And so being able to kind of dive deeply into those interests that were so fulfilling to me and so meaningful to me and have absolutely shaped who I am as an adult. And I think also that I have a lot more hobbies as an adult than a lot of other adults my age. I have more passion areas, more interest areas because I was able to so thoroughly develop those as a young person and integrate them into who I am. I think one of the hardest things about walking the path of unschooling is the outsider influence. My father is not supportive of the philosophy. There's a lot of reasons we don't have a great relationship, but that is a huge one, is that, my own dad would tell me all the time that I was going to end up homeless and that I would be flipping burgers at McDonald's my whole life. I just want to say I think there is nothing wrong with working in a food service environment, but he had a big stigma against it and would constantly tell me that I would be unsuccessful as an adult. And he wasn't the only one. You hear that from the outside world constantly. I was told as a kid that my mom was abusing me, and I didn't have any understanding of what do you mean this is great. I'm having a wonderful experience abusing me, but getting that constant pressure from the outside world. Are you learning enough? Do you know it? Being quizzed by everyone all the time. And that coupled with being dyslexic meant that a lot of times I felt like I couldn't really pass those quizzes. I didn't know. I'm this 12-year-old unschooler who also can't read. It doesn't look great. And so having that combination of unschooling and neurodiversity, which so many unschooling families do live at that intersection, is this unique cross-section of societal disdain.
So, given all of that, talk a little bit about how your unschooling kind of set you up for your undergraduate and graduate career, which is has been pretty intense and very impressive, I think, anyway.
Thanks.
So, what was that transition like, and how were you set up for success in those experiences?
Sure. I think the first way that unschooling really set me up for success in undergrad was that I did not go on a conveyor belt from, 16, 17 years old trying to pick a college to being in that environment. I was 20 years old, just barely 20 years old in my first year of undergrad.
Ah.
And I think that actually gave me, at the time, I was very self-conscious about it. I did not want people to know that I was a year and a half older than other people, barely anything. Looking
Yeah.
back on it, but I was really self-conscious about it because I felt like, oh, I'm starting out late and I'm starting behind everyone else. But what I actually discovered was that I went to undergraduate with purpose because I knew I wanted to work with disenfranchised people. I knew I wanted to work in the mental health industry, which is what I do now. And I was able to go in with that focus, stay on that focus. I didn't switch around a whole bunch. I ended up kind of in a more public health angle on it, because I found that I loved science once I was there. I loved being in the lab. I loved the public health angle. But I was really able to have a more grounded experience of exploring what I was interested in because I came in at the time that was right for me, not the time that the clock said.
Right. Right.
And I also found that while a lot of other people were unlearning negative habits, negative study habits, negative social habits, I was learning all new good habits right from the beginning. I'll never forget being in a first year psychology course and the professor saying to everyone, everything that you learned in high school English about writing, just your first step is to forget it and unlearn it and never use it again. And I remember sitting there in that class thinking, great, I'm ahead. I don't have to unlearn anything. Teach me what you want me to know about writing for college. And so having that foundation of being able to build meaningful and good study, I can't tell you I really sat down and studied much before undergrad. And so
Right.
being able to build those positive study habits around, again, something that I wanted to do. I went to college because I wanted to go to college, not because my parents were telling me, oh, this is your next step. You have to do this now. In fact, I'm
Right.
a first generation college student, so it was, I think, a bit of a surprise to them in some ways when I came forward and said, I'm going to college.
And not only college, but then graduate school.
But then graduate school after that, right? So I went to Columbia University for grad school. That was a very different experience because I was at Hampshire College as an undergrad, test-free, grade-free environment. RIP
So
Hampshire.
sorry. I'm so sorry.
I know the news hurt. The news hurt, as I think it did for a lot of people in the alternate education world. Hampshire has been a real pinnacle of alternate education thought and experimentation, and very sad to see it go. But it was such a great match for me. I picked it especially because I already knew that I didn't value grades as a metric of learning. I already knew that I valued self-expression and the ability to dive deeply into areas of interest. That's exactly what Hampshire provided me with. So I will say I did amazingly at Hampshire. It was a bit of a shock when I went on to Columbia to be for the first time ever in a graded classroom in grad school. I was very bored.
Uh,
I did not find Columbia's curriculum to be particularly exciting. In fact, many of the papers that I was reading in my second and third year at Columbia are papers that I read in my first or second year of undergrad. So
mm,
it felt like really a rewind on some of my education there, but also very very challenging to be in a room for the first time with people who, at the end of every class, we're spending 15 minutes with people asking questions. Professor, if I hand this in, just one day late, how much is that going to take off my GPA? And I'm like, just don't hand it in late. Hand it in late and take the penalty for it. We're spending so much time in this sort of gamified discussion
right.
about
The
grade.
game of school,
Yes,
basically,
the
right?
game of school. We're
Yeah.
playing the game of school so hard, and I just was not used to playing the game of school. That said, I still did very well there. I got a 4.0 at Columbia, which I think anyone could do if, thank you. But I think anyone could do it if you have the capacity to handle multiple small deadlines. That is the game of school. Lots and lots of small deadlines, and if you can conform to submitting many, many things across many deadlines on time, and you're a decent writer, I don't see why you wouldn't get a 4.0.
And how did your dyslexia play into? Because I would imagine graduate school in particular was an awful lot of like just reading stuff, not including stuff that may not have been all that interesting, to be honest with you. So,
Yes, yes, definitely. So I disclose my dyslexia when I enter an academic program because I do receive some accommodations. Typically, the accommodations are screen reader and dictation software. I provide them myself, so it's not a big deal to the school. So that's what I use for reading. I have a screen reader that reads things to me. If it's a shorter thing or a more simple thing, I'll read it myself. But for, a big, long 20-page in-depth research paper, that's going to take me way too
that's
long. I'm
right.
not going to
Yeah.
get through it. So
Yeah.
I had those accommodations. But one of the main accommodations that Columbia offered me that I didn't ask for was time with a learning specialist. And I did not even know what that was upon entrance to grad school. They granted me 3 sessions. I did one. And basically, what we did during that hour was she taught me everything that she knows about how to do the game of test taking.
Ah.
Things that maybe other students would have learned in high school, middle school, or even undergrad. For example, one of the I'll never forget her saying this. If you're torn between two really good answers and one of them is D, don't pick that one. And
Oh.
I remember being like, "Are you kidding me? I mean, it's just like this is a game. This is like how to play a video game."
Wow.
And just getting that very there's not another word for it, just very gamified guidance on how to take a test. I was like, if this is all we have to offer here, like I'm good. No offense to her. I'm sure she's a wonderful person, and for folks who need that academic coaching is really helpful. But for me, I was like, honestly, if I'm going to take a test, I want to know if I got it right. I want to know if got the material right, but that's not the point of tests.
And so now you are, I know, like right after graduate school, you were doing leading a program in Alaska, and then talk a little bit about what you're doing now, and where you're going with it, I guess.
That's right. Straight out of grad school, I took on an interim executive directorship on a rural island in Alaska. That was a wonderful experience, but very challenging, and I was glad I was there as an interim, which I was always meant to be. So it's good. So I about 10 months there until they found an appropriate
Wow.
executive director, but I left. I
Right.
like to be able to specialize, and I think part of my driven specialization mindset is because of the alternative education that I had growing up. I was allowed to really dig in and dive deep, and I'm a much more deep person than I am broad. I like to hone in on an interest, learn what there is to know, really get a handle on the research, really get a handle on best practices for this population. And when you have 35 clients and 35 diagnoses, you just can't do that.
Right.
And so
Right.
I like being able to really understand, what does the literature say about this? What are the best practices? What are the common current understandings in the field? And how can we really deeply work with these people to make significant, meaningful change in their life rather than, I have, like I said, 30 people, 30
Right.
diagnoses.
Right.
I
Right.
can't do that same level of deep dive on each
Depth. Yeah.
individual person.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
love to be able to kind of just dig my teeth in, and especially on something that fascinates me, and just unravel it.
If you were to encounter someone like a parent, a young parent who's thinking about like the unschooling path, what advice might you give them about how to go about figuring out if it's right for them and then getting themselves set up to do it set in a satisfying way?
Talk to your kids. That's my number one piece of advice. Include your kids on the decision making, include your kids on the thought process. I think it's very jarring for young people to be in this educational environment, school, right, all day, where they're getting the message that school is the only way to learn and school will give you all the knowledge you need. And in the meanwhile, in the background, the parent is thinking, the parent is planning, and the parent comes to the kid one day totally sold on this. And sometimes the kids are like, but bring me along on this journey. I need to be part of this with you. So really including the kids collaboratively in every aspect of the decision making and listening to them, right? If they don't want to, you can't force someone to be a self-directed learner. If they
Mm-hmm.
want to be in school, school is where they belong. If they want to be in, Montessori is where they belong, to the best of a parent's ability. Obviously, not everyone has the sort of privileges to
Right.
shop for every type of education out there. But if you're able to, and you're able to kind of offer your kid those choices, look around at all of the options that are available and make sure it's something that not only aligns with what you feel and believe about education, but also what your kids feel and believe about education. Give them that language to understand, help them understand what is the philosophy of unschooling. I so often meet young unschoolers who have no idea what unschooling is. They have no idea. And I'm like, let's have that conversation where we're introducing those philosophical pieces of unschooling so that unschoolers know that it's self-directed education, that they're driving the car and the parent is sitting next to them offering guidance. But in order to get a kid in that driver's seat, they have to want to be there. They have to believe in it. And so many kids do naturally until they have that taken away from them by school. And
Right.
so just making sure that they have that knowledge and understanding. And of course, I think you know I'm going to say this, but one of the things that was truly the most meaningful for me and my family was being able to be in spaces around other unschoolers. In fact, we didn't even really start using the words unschooling until we attended the Northeast Unschooling Conference for the first time. We kind of just called ourselves, I don't know, eclectic homeschoolers, self-directed homeschoolers. But having that language was so empowering to me, and having that community was so empowering to me. I met lifelong friends there that understood me in a way that people who go to school still can't understand what it is like to be so different from all of your peers, to have such a different walk in life. And for my parents, being able to get together with other unschooling parents gave them a huge, tremendous amount of confidence, ideas, inspiration, tackling problems as they came up. I'm at the conference off, playing with my friends, hanging out, playing werewolf, and they're in these really serious conversations talking about, how to help inspire us, how to keep us motivated, how to offer us new opportunities without being perceived as pushing, right? They're having those conversations with adults while I'm building those really core friendships with other people who, for the first time in my life, get this integral part of me. And so I would say if you have the ability, go to an unschooling camp, go to an unschooling convention, get together with local unschoolers if you have that. One of the biggest resources, unfortunately, I hate to point people in the direction of Facebook, but every state has an unschooling Facebook group, and it is so important to join that group and ask those questions about the legality. How exactly does this work? Every unschooling parent I've ever met is like a mini expert on homeschooling laws in their state, and you have to be. You have
Yeah.
to be if you want to successfully do this with your kids. And there's so much to the philosophy that falls on parents. It's not an easy walk for parents or for kids. So just knowing that you're taking on this tremendous responsibility with your kid's education, a tremendous amount of ownership for both the parent and the child, and really being able to prepare for that by having your questions really answered, knowing the laws, knowing the community, knowing what resources are out there. There's so much online now too that is like mind-blowingly amazing free education online. So knowing where to look for that kind of thing, knowing where to get those great free resources. I'm a really strong believer in low-income folks being able to unschool. I was low income, and there are so many opportunities, so many free things that you can do. A lot of people feel that it's, I hear this all the time in my comments on my TikTok. Oh, only rich people can do this.
Right.
And there is some truth to there being a financial burden to unschooling. However, I hear all the time also in my comments whenever someone says that, a whole bunch of parents pop in and say, I have 4 kids. If I were to send them all to, a program, a day program, daycare, that would be like, how many hundreds of thousands of dollars. So really sitting down and making sure it can work with your family and learning about how to make it work for your individual family and your individual circumstances. But my
Right.
two biggest things are talk to your kids about it and try to get together with other unschoolers to have that face-to-face interaction if you can.